As he reached for the patient's chart, his hands trembled slightly. The name at the top read, Robert Mitchell, age 68. Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. After 32 years, he was staring at the face of the man who had looked his mother in the eye 32 years ago and said 5 words that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. That baby is not mine. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the sterile hospital room as Dr. Marcus Williams adjusted his stethoscope. The elderly white man, lying unconscious on the bed, had been rushed in an hour ago, his heart failing, his life hanging by a thread. Marcus had seen hundreds of patients in his 15 years as a cardiac surgeon, but something about this man's weathered face made him pause. Now the man who had rejected him at birth was dying, and Marcus was the only surgeon in the county skilled enough to save him. The irony was suffocating. The question that burned in Marcus's chest was simple yet devastating. Do you save the life of the man who threw yours away? Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from right now. Are you at home, on your lunch break? Maybe lying in bed? Let me know, because this community is what makes these stories special. Thank you so much for clicking on this story. I know you could be watching anything right now, but you chose to spend your time here with me, and that means everything. If you're ready to dive into a story that will make you question everything you think you know about family, forgiveness, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, then you're in the right place. Now let's go back to the beginning, to where it all started. 32 years ago in a small town in Georgia, Robert Mitchell was 24, fresh out of college, and had just returned home to help run his family's construction business. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair and blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. More importantly, he was white, and in Millfield in 1992, that meant something. 32 years earlier, in the humid summer of 1992, Sarah Williams was 19 years old and believed in fairy tales. She had skin the color of warm honey, eyes that sparkled with dreams, and a laugh that could fill a room. She worked the evening shift at Mel's Diner, on the outskirts of Millfield, Georgia, a town where everybody knew everybody, and secrets had a way of traveling faster than Sunday gossip. Their love story began on a Tuesday night in July when Robert walked into Mel's Diner at 11:30. Just 30 minutes before closing, Sarah was wiping down tables, humming softly to herself, when the bell above the door chimed. "We're about to close," she called out without looking up. "Just coffee," he said. Black. Something in his voice made her look. He was sitting in the corner booth, still in his work clothes, dust on his boots, exhaustion written across his face. But when their eyes met, something electric passed between them. "Every day's rough when you're trying to prove yourself to a father who thinks you're too soft for the family business," Robert replied. "Rough day?" Sarah asked, pouring his coffee. Sarah smiled. "Honey, if you think you're soft, you should meet my mama. She'd have you believing you're made of marshmallows and good intentions." That made him laugh, and Sarah felt something flutter in her chest. This white boy with tired eyes and gentle hands was nothing like the men she usually met. For 3 months, Robert came to the diner every Tuesday and Thursday night. They would talk until closing time, sharing dreams and fears, and the kind of secrets you only tell someone in the soft darkness of late night. Sarah learned that Robert wrote poetry in his spare time, that he'd rather be teaching literature than laying foundations, and that his father, Old Man Mitchell, was one of the most respected and feared men in town. By October, they were meeting in secret. By November, they were in love. By December, Sarah was pregnant. Robert learned that Sarah was putting herself through nursing school, that she sent half her tips home to help her grandmother, and that she had never been more than 50 miles outside of Millfield. She told him on New Year's Eve, as fireworks lit up the sky above Millfield. They were parked by Miller's Lake, the same place where generations of teenagers had shared first kisses and made promises they might not keep. "I'm scared," Sarah whispered, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Robert took her face in his hands. "Don't be. We'll figure this out. I love you, Sarah. I love you, and I'm going to love this baby." For 2 months, they lived in their secret bubble. Robert would drive to the next town over to buy baby books, hiding them under his truck seat. Sarah would press her hand to her growing belly and whisper stories about the father the baby would have, a man who was kind and gentle and nothing like the hard men who filled their small town. But secrets in small towns are like dandelions in spring. No matter how carefully you tend your garden, they find a way to spread. "You will not disgrace this family," Old Man Mitchell's voice boomed through the thin walls. "You will not throw away everything we've built for some colored girl and her bastard baby." Old Man Mitchell found out on a cold February morning when his foreman mentioned seeing Robert's truck parked behind the colored section of town 3 nights in a row. The confrontation happened in the construction office, behind closed doors, but the men working outside could hear the shouting. The men outside pretended to work, but they were listening to every word. By noon, half the town knew. By evening, Sarah's grandmother was crying at her kitchen table. Robert came to Sarah that night, but he was different. The gentle man who had held her hand and whispered poetry was gone, replaced by someone cold and distant. "My father knows," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "So, Robert, I love you. You love me. We can make this work." "No, Sarah, we can't. You don't understand what it's like here, what it would mean." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're choosing your father's money over your own child." The fight lasted until dawn, but by the time the sun rose, Robert was gone, and Sarah knew he wasn't coming back. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Sarah's voice cracked. "What's fair about any of this? What's fair about you making me believe you were different?" She gave birth to Marcus on a rainy September morning, alone except for her grandmother, who held her hand and whispered prayers. She had hoped, even in those final moments, that Robert would walk through the hospital doors, that love would win over fear. Instead, what she got was a visit from Old Man Mitchell himself. He walked into her hospital room 6 hours after Marcus was born, dressed in his Sunday best, carrying an envelope thick with cash. "That baby don't look nothing like my son," he said, staring at the newborn in Sarah's arms. "He has his eyes," Sarah whispered. "He's got colored eyes, dark eyes, nothing like the Mitchell family. He's your grandson." Sarah looked down at Marcus, sleeping peacefully in her arms, his skin a beautiful blend of her honey and Robert's cream, his features delicate and perfect. "What about Robert? What does he say?" Old Man Mitchell dropped the envelope on the bedside table. "There's enough money in there to get you and that baby out of town, enough to start over somewhere else. But if you stay, if you keep spreading lies about my son, you'll find life in Millfield very difficult." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had expected Old Man Mitchell's cruelty, but Robert's betrayal cut deeper than she thought possible. "Robert says that baby is not his. Says he never touched you. Says you're just another girl trying to trap a white man with a lie. Get out," she whispered. Old Man Mitchell left the envelope and walked out, but his presence lingered like smoke. Sarah held Marcus tighter and made a promise that would shape both their lives.
I said, "Get out."
"Take the money, girl. It's more than you'll see in a lifetime of washing dishes." She found work as a night shift cleaner at Georgia State University while taking nursing classes during the day. Marcus spent his early years in the university's childcare center, surrounded by books and learning, while Sarah worked 2 jobs and dreamed of a better life. Sarah left Millfield 3 days later, taking a Greyhound bus to Atlanta, with Marcus in her arms and hope in her heart. She had torn up Old Man Mitchell's money and left the pieces scattered across the hospital parking lot, but she had her grandmother's life savings, her determination, and a plan. "I am going to make sure you never need anything from anybody," she whispered to her son, especially not from him. She never told him about his father. When Marcus asked, which he did with increasing frequency as he got older, Sarah would simply say, "Your daddy wasn't ready to be a father, baby, but that's his loss, not ours." Marcus grew up believing his father was some nameless man who had walked away, not knowing that the truth was both simpler and more complicated. He threw himself into his studies with the kind of intensity that comes from having something to prove, even when you're not sure what you're trying to prove. By the time Marcus was 5, Sarah had her nursing degree. By the time he was 10, she was working as a surgical nurse at Grady Hospital. And every night, as she tucked Marcus into bed in their small apartment, she would tell him stories about how special he was, how smart he was, how he could be anything he wanted to be. He was the kid who read medical textbooks for fun, who knew he wanted to be a doctor before he knew how to ride a bike, who spent his summers volunteering at the hospital where his mother worked. The other nurses called him Little Doctor, and Sarah would beam with pride every time. But success couldn't fill the hole that not knowing his father had carved in Marcus's heart. He would lie awake at night, creating elaborate fantasies about the man who had helped create him. Sometimes his father was a soldier who had died in battle. Sometimes he was a doctor working in a foreign country. Sometimes he was just a good man who had made a mistake and regretted it every day. Marcus graduated valedictorian from high school, earned a full scholarship to Morehouse College, and then got accepted to Emory Medical School. Sarah cried the day he got his acceptance letter, not just from pride, but from relief. Her son was going to be everything she had dreamed he could be. During his residency at Emory, Marcus started asking his mother more pointed questions. Medical school was brutal, but Marcus thrived under pressure. He specialized in cardiac surgery, drawn to the precision and life-or-death responsibility of operating on the human heart. He was the student who stayed latest, studied hardest, and never let anyone see him struggle. But the questions about his father never went away. If anything, they intensified as Marcus got older. He would look in the mirror and see features that didn't quite match his mother's, wonder about the other half of his genetic puzzle. Imagine conversations with a man whose face he couldn't picture. "I need to know about my medical history," he said, one evening over dinner. "What if there are genetic conditions I should be aware of?" "That's not true, Mama. You know who he is. You've always known."
Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she cut her chicken. "Baby, I told you everything I know."
"I'm not a child anymore. I'm 26 years old. I'm about to be a doctor. Don't I have a right to know where I come from?" Sarah set down her fork and looked at her son, this brilliant, beautiful man she had raised alone. Some stones are better left unturned. After completing his residency, Marcus received job offers from hospitals across the country. He could have gone anywhere, worked with the best cardiac surgeons in the world, built a practice in a major city where his reputation would open every door. The conversation ended there, but it was the beginning of a crack in their relationship that would only widen with time. "That's not your decision to make." Instead, he chose to return to Georgia, accepting a position at Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Gainesville, just 60 miles from Millfield. "Why would you want to go back there?" she asked, when Marcus told her about the job. Sarah was horrified. Marcus couldn't explain it, not in a way that would make sense to anyone else, but something was pulling him back to that part of Georgia. Some unfinished business he couldn't name. "It's a good opportunity. They're building a new cardiac wing. I'd be the head of the department." "There are opportunities everywhere, Marcus." "Why there?" "Maybe I want to help people who look like us," he said finally. "Maybe I want to be the doctor I needed when I was growing up." Sarah knew there was more to it, but she also knew her son well enough to recognize that stubborn set to his jaw. Marcus had made up his mind. He moved to Gainesville in the summer of 2018, renting a small house with a view of the mountains, and throwing himself into his work. The hospital was everything they had promised, and more. Marcus found himself performing surgeries that saved lives daily, building a reputation as one of the most skilled cardiac surgeons in the state. But on his days off, he would drive south toward Millfield, never quite getting there, but circling closer and closer like a moth drawn to flame. It was on one of these drives, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in October, that Marcus first saw Robert Mitchell. He told himself he was just exploring the area, getting to know his new home, but the truth was more complicated. Marcus was searching for something he couldn't name, some piece of himself that felt missing. The man looked up as if sensing he was being watched, and for a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Marcus felt a jolt of recognition, so strong it took his breath away. This stranger looked familiar in a way that went beyond casual resemblance. This stranger looked like home. Marcus drove away quickly, his heart pounding, but he couldn't shake the image of that face. That night, he did something he had never done before. He hired a private investigator. He was sitting on the porch of a modest house on the outskirts of Millfield, reading a newspaper, a glass of sweet tea sweating on the table beside him. Marcus had pulled over to check his GPS when he noticed the man. Something about his profile, the way he held his shoulders, the shape of his hands, made Marcus's chest tighten.
"What do you have?"
Marcus described the man he had seen, gave her the address, explained about his mother's time in Millfield 32 years ago. "I need you to find someone," Marcus told the investigator, a middle-aged woman named Janet Pike, who worked out of a small office in Atlanta. "I don't have much to go on." Janet Pike had been in the business long enough to read between the lines. "You think this man might be your father?" "I think he might be." "Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth is harder to live with than the questions." Marcus thought about that for a long moment. "I've been living with questions my whole life. I think it's time for some answers." Janet Pike was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she had assembled a file that would change Marcus's life forever. Robert Mitchell, age 59, divorced, No children, owned a small construction company that he had inherited from his father, lived alone in the house where Marcus had seen him. The same house where he had grown up, had never married, though he had been engaged twice, both engagements ending mysteriously. From the Millfield Gazette, dated September 15, 1992, local man denies paternity claims. The article was brief, just a few paragraphs, but it contained a quote from Robert Mitchell that made Marcus's world tilt. But it was the newspaper clipping that stopped Marcus cold. "I never had relations with that girl," Robert was quoted as saying. "That baby she's carrying isn't mine, and I won't be responsible for her lies." But Janet Pike wasn't finished. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the newspaper clipping until the words blurred together. All those years of wondering, of creating elaborate fantasies about his father, and the truth was uglier than anything he had imagined. There it was, in black and white. The confirmation of what Marcus had suspected but never wanted to believe. This man, this stranger, who looked so familiar, was his father, and his father had publicly denied his existence before he was even born. Then why did he deny it? "There's more," she said during their next meeting. "I talked to some people who were around back then. Your mother wasn't lying, Dr. Williams. Robert Mitchell was seen with her regularly for months. The whole town knew about it. His father, Old Man Mitchell, was, let's say he had very strong feelings about racial mixing. Word is, he threatened to disown Robert if he acknowledged the baby. Cut him off completely. So he chose money over his child." Marcus felt sick. If he cared so much, why didn't he ever try to find us? "It's more complicated than that. I found someone who was willing to talk off the record. Robert Mitchell never got over your mother. Never married, never had other children. Folks say he's been carrying a torch for 30 years. Maybe he thought it was too late. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he was a coward." Janet Pike closed the file. "The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" The truth was, learning his father's identity hadn't brought the peace Marcus had expected. Instead, it had opened up new questions, deeper wounds. How do you confront a man who threw you away before you were born? How do you reconcile the gentle hands you inherited with the cowardice that shaped your life? Natus didn't know. For days, he carried the weight of the truth around like a stone in his chest. He would find himself driving toward Millfield and then turning around. He would pick up his phone to call his mother and then set it down again. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long Marcus thought the call had dropped. 2 months after receiving Janet Pike's report, Marcus finally called his mother. "I know who he is," he said without preamble when Sarah answered the phone. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Mama!" "I was wondering when this day would come," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What good would it have done? You think knowing his name would have made you feel better? You think knowing he denied you would have helped you sleep at night? You had a right to a father who loved you. Since I couldn't give you that, I gave you everything else I could. I had a right to know." Marcus could hear his mother crying, and it broke his heart. "Mama, I'm not angry with you. I just need to understand." "What's to understand?" "I was 19 and stupid, and I thought love could conquer anything. I was wrong. Tell me about him, the real story." And so Sarah did. She told Marcus about the Tuesday nights at the diner, about the poetry and the gentle hands and the way Robert used to look at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She told him about the pregnancy and the promises and the way everything fell apart when Old Man Mitchell found out. "He loved you," Sarah said. "Before you were born, he loved you. He used to put his hand on my belly and talk to you. He picked out names. He was going to teach you to throw a baseball and help you with your homework and all the things fathers do. But he didn't." Marcus drove to Millfield on a Saturday morning in December, when the air was crisp and the sky was the color of old steel. He had rehearsed what he was going to say 100 times, but as he pulled up to Robert's house, all his prepared words evaporated. "No, he didn't. And I will never forgive him for that. Not because he broke my heart, but because he broke yours before you even knew you had one." That night, Marcus made a decision. He was going to confront Robert Mitchell. Not for closure, not for forgiveness, but because he needed to look the man in the eye and tell him exactly what his cowardice had cost. Robert was in his front yard, raking leaves, wearing an old flannel shirt and faded jeans. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Marcus could see his own eyes in Robert's face, his own jawline, his own long fingers wrapped around the rake handle. Sarah's boy, Robert said quietly. Marcus got out of his car and walked across the yard. Robert looked up, and Marcus watched as recognition dawned in his eyes. Not recognition of who Marcus was, but recognition of who he looked like. Robert's face went white. The rake slipped from his hands and clattered to the ground. "Dr. Marcus Williams," Marcus replied. "Your son." "I know who you are," Marcus continued. "I know what you did. I know how you denied me before I was even born, how you let your father's money matter more than your child's life. Then help me understand. Help me understand how a man can make promises to a woman he claims to love, and then throw those promises away the moment things get difficult." Robert sat down heavily on his porch steps. "Every day for 32 years, I have thought about you, wondered what you looked like, what kind of man you became, whether you were happy." "You don't understand," Robert whispered. "I thought you were better off without me, but not enough to actually find out. That wasn't your decision to make." They stared at each other across the yard, two men connected by blood and separated by 32 years of silence. "Your mother," Robert said finally, "is she well?" "Don't you dare," Marcus said, his voice sharp. "Don't you dare ask about her like you care. You had 32 years to ask about her." "I was young. I was scared." "You were a coward." Robert flinched as if Marcus had slapped him. "Yes, I was a coward. I wrote you letters," Robert said suddenly. "Hundreds of them. Never sent a single one. They're in my bedroom dresser, third drawer down. 32 years of things I wanted to say to a son I was too afraid to claim." Marcus felt his anger wavering, and that made him even angrier. Letters don't make up for a childhood without a father. Letters don't make up for 32 years of wondering if I was wanted. The admission hung in the air between them. Marcus had expected denials, excuses, anger. He hadn't expected this quiet acceptance of guilt. Robert looked at Marcus with eyes that held 32 years of regret. "I want you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my choices. I want you to know that you were wanted, you were loved, even if I was too weak to show it. And I want you to know that seeing the man you've become makes me proud and ashamed in equal measure. So, what do you want from me? Forgiveness? Understanding? Some kind of happy reunion? No, they don't. Proud? You have no right to be proud. You had nothing to do with who I became." "No, I didn't. Your mother did that. She raised a son I could never deserve." Marcus wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than the complicated mix of emotions swirling in his chest. But looking at this broken man sitting on his porch steps, Marcus felt something unexpected: pity. "I know. I'm a cardiac surgeon," Marcus said. "I save lives every day. I'm successful. I'm respected. I make a difference in the world. And none of that has anything to do with you. I don't need you. I never needed you." "I know that too." Marcus turned to walk away, but Robert's voice stopped him. "Some Marcus." It was the first time Robert had said his name, and hearing it felt like a punch to the chest. "Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize. Even if you can't forgive me, thank you for letting me say I'm sorry." Marcus drove home in silence, feeling emptier than he had before the confrontation. He had thought facing his father would bring closure, but instead, it had opened up wounds he didn't know how to heal. But Millfield was a small town, and news traveled fast. Marcus began hearing about Robert through the medical community grapevine. Robert had been having chest pains, had been to the emergency room twice, had been told he needed to see a cardiologist, but kept putting it off. For 6 months after their confrontation, Marcus tried to pretend Robert Mitchell didn't exist. He threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, performing surgeries with a precision that bordered on obsession. His colleagues began to worry about his long hours, his refusal to take time off, the way he seemed to be running from something. Marcus said nothing, but Patricia's words stayed with him. He found himself thinking about Robert's health, wondering if he should call, if he should somehow intervene. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was one of the best cardiac surgeons in the state, and his father was walking around with a time bomb in his chest. "Stubborn old fool," Dr. Patricia Jenkins, the ER doctor, told Marcus over coffee one afternoon. "He's heading for a major cardiac event if he doesn't get help soon. But you know how these old-timers are. They think showing weakness is worse than dying." But every time Marcus picked up the phone, he remembered Robert's words from 32 years ago. "That baby is not mine." He remembered his mother's tears, his own childhood questions, the hole in his heart that Robert's absence had carved. It was a Tuesday night in June, exactly 32 years after Robert first walked into Mel's diner. When Marcus's pager went off, he was at home, reading medical journals, when the shrill beep cut through the quiet of his house. Let someone else save him, Marcus told himself. He made his choice 32 years ago. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Emergency surgery, the voice on the other end said when Marcus called in. Massive MI. Patient barely stable. We need you here now. Marcus had performed hundreds of emergency surgeries. He knew the drill. Grab his keys, drive to the hospital, save a life. But as he walked through the emergency room doors 20 minutes later, something felt different. Patients in or 3, the charge nurse told him. Robert Mitchell, 68-year-old male, massive anterior wall. In eye, he arrested twice in the ambulance. Marcus felt the world stop. The hallway seemed to tilt. The sounds of the hospital became muffled and distant. After 6 months of avoiding his father, fate had delivered Robert directly into his hands. Dr. Williams? The nurse was looking at him with concern. Are you all right? Marcus forced himself to focus. What's his condition? This was the moment Marcus had never imagined, the choice he had never prepared for. In his hands lay the life of the man who had given him life, and then walked away. One decision could change everything. One decision could end everything. Critical. The blockage is severe. He needs emergency bypass surgery or he's not going to make it. Marcus stood at the threshold of R3, looking through the window at the man lying unconscious on the table. Robert looked smaller than he remembered, older, more fragile. Monitors surrounded him, keeping track of a heart that was failing, keeping him alive by the thinnest of margins. Dr. Williams? The surgical team was waiting, gowned and ready. We need to move now. Marcus closed his eyes and made his choice. Marcus scrubbed in with mechanical precision, his hands steady despite the storm raging in his heart. As he entered the operating room, he transformed into the surgeon he had trained to be, focused, methodical, determined to save a life regardless of who owned it. Let's save this man, he said to his team, and for the next 4 hours, that's exactly what he did. The surgery was complex, requiring multiple bypasses to restore blood flow to Robert's damaged heart. Marcus worked with the kind of precision that comes from years of training and natural talent, his hands moving inside his father's chest, literally holding the heart that had created him. There were moments during the surgery when Robert's vitals crashed, when it seemed like they might lose him. Each time, Marcus fought harder, refused to let death win, not because he had forgiven Robert, but because saving lives was what he did. It was who he was. Beautiful work, Dr. Williams, his surgical assistant said as they closed. You saved his life. As Robert was wheeled into recovery, Marcus found himself following the gurney, unable to walk away. He stood beside the bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his father's chest, listening to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Marcus nodded, but he felt no satisfaction, no sense of accomplishment. He had done his job, nothing more. He's lucky you were here tonight, the recovery nurse said. Another hour and he wouldn't have made it. Robert woke up slowly, consciousness returning in stages. First came the awareness of pain, then the beeping of monitors, then the sterile smell of the hospital. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Marcus sitting in the chair beside his bed. Lucky, Marcus almost laughed at the word. Was it luck that had brought them together like this? Or was it something else? Some cosmic joke that forced a son to save the father who had abandoned him. Am I dead? Robert whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. Robert tried to sit up, winced at the pain in his chest. The surgery. No, you're very much alive. Was successful. 4 bypasses. Your heart should function normally for years to come. You right. Robert's eyes focused on Marcus's face. You saved my life. I did my job. It was such a simple question, but Marcus didn't have a simple answer. Why had he saved the life of the man who had rejected him? Why had he spent 4 hours fighting to repair the heart of someone who had broken his own?
Why?
Because that's what I do, Marcus said finally. I save lives. All lives. Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. You look like your mother when she was angry. She was beautiful when she was angry. Fire in her eyes, steel in her spine. I fell in love with her temper before I fell in love with anything else. Don't.
I said don't.
I don't hate you.
The words surprised Marcus as much as they seemed to surprise Robert. I thought I did, but I don't. I don't know what I feel.
I know you hate me.
That's honest. They sat in silence, father and son, connected by blood and surgery, and 32 years of missed opportunities. The letters, Robert said suddenly. I told you about the letters. They're still there, in my dresser. If something happens to me, nothing's gonna happen to you. The surgery went well. You'll recover fully. But if something does happen, I want you to have them. I want you to know that not a day passed that I didn't think about you. Marcus stood up abruptly. I need to check on other patients. Marcus, again, that name from Robert's lips. Still strange, still painful. Thank you for saving my life, for being the man I could never be. Marcus paused at the door. Get some rest. You have a long recovery ahead of you. Marcus stayed away from Robert's room for the next 3 days, managing his recovery from a distance, checking charts and test results, but avoiding direct contact. But on Thursday evening, when his shift was over and the hospital was quiet, Marcus found himself walking to room 314. How are you feeling? Robert was sitting up in bed, looking stronger, reading a book. He looked up when Marcus entered. I was wondering if you'd come back. Like I've been hit by a truck, but alive. Thanks to you. What about them? Marcus sat down in the chair he had occupied 3 nights earlier. I've been thinking about what you said, about the letters. I don't understand why you wrote them, if you never intended to send them. Robert closed his book, marked his place with a finger. Have you ever had something you needed to say but couldn't find the courage to say it out loud? Yes. The letters were my way of talking to you, of being your father, even if only on paper. Robert was quiet for a moment. They start when you were born and continue through the years. Birthdays, first days of school, graduations, all the milestones I missed. What did you write about? Everything. How proud I was when I heard you graduated valedictorian. How my heart broke when I realized I would never teach you to drive or help you with your homework. How sorry I was for being too weak to be the father you deserved. Marcus felt tears threatening, pushed them back. Words on paper don't make up for absence. No, they don't. But they're all I have to give you now. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? What? The heart attack, the surgery. My body is wearing out. The doctors say the surgery was successful, but my heart is severely damaged. I might have months, maybe a year, if I'm lucky. Robert looked directly at Marcus, and for the first time, Marcus saw his own eyes looking back at him. Because I'm dying. Marcus felt the world tilt again. That's not necessarily true. With proper care, medication, lifestyle changes. Marcus, I'm tired. I've been tired for 32 years. The only thing that's kept me going is the hope that someday I might see the man my son became. Now I have. I can die knowing that Sarah raised someone extraordinary. Don't talk like that. I need you to know something. The night you were born, I drove to the hospital. I sat in the parking lot for 3 hours trying to work up the courage to come inside. I wanted to hold you, to tell your mother I was sorry, to be the man I should have been. But you didn't. No, I didn't. My father was in that parking lot too, in his truck, watching me, making sure I didn't do something he considered foolish. So I drove home, and I've regretted it every day since. Marcus stared at his father, this broken man who had shaped his life through absence rather than presence. Your father is dead, and you still let his choices control your life. Has been for 10 years. The word son hung in the air between them. It was the first time Robert had called him that, and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Some choices can't be undone, son. Some mistakes follow you forever. I want to read them, Marcus said suddenly. The letters, I want to read them. What? Robert's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? The bedroom was spartanly decorated, but Marcus's eyes were drawn immediately to a framed photograph on the nightstand. It was his high school graduation picture, the one that had been published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution when he won a scholarship to Morehouse. Seeing his 18-year-old face staring back at him from his father's nightstand was like being punched in the chest. No, but I want to anyway. The next evening, Marcus drove to Robert's house with a key that Robert had given him and directions to the 3rd drawer of the bedroom dresser. The house was small and neat, filled with the kind of furniture that lasts for decades and the silence of a man who had lived alone for too long. The dresser drawer was exactly where Robert had said it would be, and it was filled with letters, hundreds of them, organized by year, each one addressed to my son Marcus in Robert's careful handwriting. Marcus picked up the first letter, dated September 15, 1992, his birthday, My son Marcus, it began. Today you were born, and today I became a coward. You are 3 hours old, and you are perfect. Your mother says you have my eyes and her stubborn chin. I should be holding you right now. Instead, I am sitting in my truck outside the hospital, writing a letter I will never send to a son I will never claim. I want you to know that I love you. I have loved you since the moment I knew you existed. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I will hate myself every day for not being brave enough to be your father. My son Marcus, today you turn 1 year old. I drove by the park where your mother takes you to play. I saw you on the swings, laughing, and my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. You look like me when I was little, but you have your mother's smile. I wanted to get out of the car and push you on those swings, but I am still a coward. Marcus's hands were shaking as he read. He set the first letter aside and picked up another. This one dated September 15th, 1993. Another letter from 1998. My son Marcus, you started first grade this week. I heard from Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store that you're already reading at a 3rd grade level. She says you want to be a doctor when you grow up. I am so proud of you that I can barely breathe. And another from 2004. My son Marcus, you graduated from high school today as valedictorian. I was there, sitting in the back watching you give your speech about overcoming obstacles and never giving up on your dreams. You looked right at me at one point, but you didn't know who I was. I wanted to stand up and cheer. I wanted to tell everyone in that auditorium that you are my son. Instead, I cried in my truck for an hour after the ceremony ended. Letter after letter, year after year, Robert had chronicled Marcus's entire life from a distance, celebrating his victories, worrying about his struggles, loving him from afar. The most recent letter was dated just 6 months earlier. My son Marcus, I heard you moved back to Georgia. Part of me hopes you'll come looking for me. Part of me hopes you won't. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I dream about it anyway. If you ever read this, know that you have been the greatest joy and the deepest regret of my life. There was a letter from when Marcus started medical school. I am so proud I could burst. My son is going to be a doctor. He is going to save lives and make the world better. And I had nothing to do with it except give him half his DNA. Your mother deserves all the credit for the man you're becoming. And one from when Marcus graduated medical school, Dr. Marcus Williams. I have never been prouder of anything in my life. You are everything I dreamed you could be, and more. I wish I could have been there to see you take your oath, to shake your hand, to tell you how much I love you, but I gave up that right 32 years ago. But they also revealed a man trapped by his own cowardice, who had chosen comfort over courage, who had let fear dictate 32 years of decisions. Marcus read until dawn, tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. These letters revealed a father who had loved him desperately, who had followed his life from a distance, who had celebrated every achievement and mourned every missed moment. When Marcus finished the last letter, he sat in Robert's quiet bedroom and tried to process everything he had learned. His father had loved him. His father had been proud of him. His father had regretted his choices every single day. Marcus returned to the hospital the next morning carrying a shoebox full of letters. Robert was sitting up in bed, looking stronger but also somehow more fragile, as if the weight of his confessions had aged him overnight. You read them, Robert said, when he saw the box. But none of that changed the fact that Marcus had grown up without him. All of them. And him. Marcus sat down and looked at his father for a long moment. They're beautiful, and they're heartbreaking, and they make me angry and sad at the same time. I understand. Do you? Do you understand what it was like growing up wondering if my father was dead or alive, if he ever thought about me, if I was wanted? Do you understand what it was like to have no medical history, no family stories, no sense of where I came from? Robert's face crumpled. No, I don't understand that. But I understand what it was like to love someone from a distance, to celebrate their victories in silence, to mourn the relationship we could have had. That was your choice. Yes, it was. And it was the wrong choice. I can't undo it, but I can acknowledge it. Marcus pulled out one of the letters, one from his 21st birthday. You wrote about wanting to take me for my first legal drink, about the father-son conversation you imagined having. She raised you, right? I did. I had that conversation with my mother instead. She told me about responsibility, about treating women with respect, about being the kind of man the world needs more of. She raised you right. She raised me alone. Marcus's voice was sharp. She worked 2 jobs, went to school at night, sacrificed everything to give me opportunities, and you gotta love me, from a distance without any of the hard work. Robert was quiet for a long moment. You're right, I took the easy path. I got to love you without the sleepless nights, the worry, the sacrifice. Your mother gave you everything, and I gave you nothing. The letters aren't nothing, aren't they? Marcus considered this. No, they're not nothing. They're complicated. Like everything else about this situation. They sat in silence, 2 men trying to navigate 32 years of missed connections and complicated love. I don't know how to forgive you, Marcus said finally.
I don't expect you to.
But I don't know how not to, either. You're my father. You're dying, and despite everything, I can see that you loved me.
I did. I do.
It's not enough. Love isn't enough if you don't act on it.
No, it's not.
Marcus looked at Robert, this man who had given him life and then disappeared from it, who had loved him in letters but never in person. What do you want from me?
Nothing. You've already given me more than I deserve by saving my life.
That's not an answer. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I want to know you, not the you I created in my head from newspaper clippings and overheard conversations, but the real you. I want to know what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night, what you dream about. I want to be your father, even if it's only for a little while. And what if I can't give you that? Then I'll understand, and I'll be grateful for the conversation we're having right now. Marcus felt something shifting in his chest, some wall beginning to crumble. I don't know how to have a father. I don't know how to be one. Maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Over the next several weeks, as Robert recovered from his surgery, Marcus found himself spending more and more time in room 314. What started as medical check-ins evolved into longer conversations, careful explorations of who they were and who they might become to each other. Robert told Marcus about his childhood, about growing up under Old Man Mitchell's harsh rule, about the poetry he used to write and the dreams he had abandoned. Marcus shared stories about medical school, about the patients who had touched his life, about the weight of holding other people's hearts in his hands. They discovered they shared more than just physical features. Both men loved baseball, though they rooted for different teams. Both were early risers who found peace in quiet mornings. Both had a tendency toward perfectionism that could be either a strength or a curse.
You get that from me, Robert said one afternoon when Marcus mentioned his obsessive preparation for surgeries.
I thought I got it from trying to prove myself without a father. Maybe it's both. These conversations were delicate dances around the hurt that lay between them. They talked about medicine and baseball and books, but avoided the deeper questions about lost time and missed opportunities. Sarah called Marcus every few days, worried about his emotional state.
Are you sure this is healthy?
She asked during one of their conversations. Getting close to him now when he's dying? I'm not getting close to him, Mama. I'm just trying to understand. Understanding and forgiving are 2 different things. I know that. Do you? Because I can hear something in your voice. Something that sounds like hope. Marcus couldn't deny it, despite everything, despite 32 years of absence, despite the pain and the anger and the complicated mess of their situation. He was beginning to hope. Hope that they could build something meaningful in whatever time Robert had left. Hope that love, however flawed and late, might be better than no love at all. But hope, Marcus was learning, could be dangerous. 3 weeks after Robert was discharged from the hospital, Marcus got another emergency call. Robert had collapsed at home, his heart struggling again, his condition critical. This time, Marcus didn't hesitate. He met the ambulance at the hospital, took charge of Robert's care, refused to let anyone else make the critical decisions. It's not looking good, Dr. Patricia Jenkins told him after they had stabilized Robert. His heart is severely weakened. The previous damage combined with this new event. Marcus, you need to prepare yourself. Robert was conscious but weak, breathing with difficulty even with oxygen support. When he saw Marcus, he smiled. Twice in 1 month, he whispered. You're going to get tired of saving my life. Don't talk. Save your energy. For what? We both know what's happening here. Marcus checked Robert's chart, his vitals, the results of the latest tests. Everything confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Robert was dying. How long? Marcus asked Dr. Jenkins privately. Days. Maybe a week, if we're lucky. Marcus felt the walls of his carefully constructed emotional barriers crumbling. Just when he was beginning to know his father, he was about to lose him. Marcus took time off work to stay with Robert, something he had never done for any patient. They moved Robert to a private room with a view of the mountains, and Marcus settled into the chair beside his bed. "You don't have to stay," Robert said on the first evening. "Where else would I be?" "Living your life. You have patients who need you. Right now, you're my patient. No, right now I'm your father, and fathers tell their sons to go live their lives." Marcus looked at Robert, this man who was finally trying to be a father in his last days. "It's too late for that. You don't get to be my father now, not after 32 years. "You're right. I don't get to be your father, but I am your father, whether I've earned it or not." "What's the difference? Being a father is biology. Being a dad is choice. I was never your dad, Marcus. I know that, but I've always been your father." The distinction hit Marcus harder than he expected. "I needed a dad. I know, and I'm sorry I couldn't be that for you." They talked through the night, sharing stories and filling in the gaps of 32 years. Robert told Marcus about the business he had built, about the employees who had become like family, about the charities he supported quietly, and the community he had served in small ways. "I tried to be a good man in other ways," Robert said. "I know it doesn't make up for failing you, but I tried to do some good in the world." Marcus told Robert about his work, about the lives he had saved, about the children he hoped to have someday and the father he wanted to be to them. "You'll be a better father than I ever was," Robert said. "That's not a high bar to clear. You'll be a better father than you think you will be. You have your mother's heart and my stubborn determination. Your children will be lucky."
Will you tell me about her? About what she was really like when you knew her?
Robert's eyes lit up despite his exhaustion. She was magic. Absolute magic. She could light up a room just by walking into it. She was funny and smart and so damn stubborn. When she set her mind to something, nothing could stop her. She still is that way. "I know. I've kept track." "She never got married." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "I know that too. Do you think she never married because of you?" "I hope not. I hope she didn't let my cowardice ruin her chance at happiness." Marcus thought about his mother, about the men who had tried to court her over the years, about how she had always found reasons to keep them at arm's length. "I think she did," Marcus said softly. Robert closed his eyes, and Marcus saw tears leak from the corners. "That's another thing I can never make right." On Robert's last night, Marcus called Sarah. "He's dying, Mama. Tonight, maybe tomorrow morning." Sarah was quiet for a long time. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. I'm angry and sad and grateful, all at the same time." "Grateful? For getting to know him, even if only for a few weeks, for understanding that he loved me, even if he couldn't show it, for..." Marcus struggled to find the words. "For getting to say goodbye." "Do you want me to come?" Marcus considered this. "Do you want to?" "Part of me does. Part of me wants to see him one more time, but I don't know if I can forgive him." "You don't have to forgive him, Mama. But maybe you could say goodbye too." Sarah arrived at the hospital at dawn, looking older than Marcus remembered, wearing the blue dress she saved for special occasions. Marcus met her in the hallway outside Robert's room. "How does he look?" she asked. "Like he's dying, but also peaceful, like he's finally letting himself rest." Sarah nodded and walked into the room. Robert was awake, staring out the window at the sunrise. When he saw Sarah, his face transformed. As Sarah, her name was a prayer on his lips. "Hello, Robert?" They looked at each other across 32 years of silence, two people who had loved each other once, and then lost everything. "You're still beautiful," Robert whispered. "You're still a charmer." Despite everything, Sarah smiled, and Marcus saw a glimpse of the 19-year-old girl his mother had once been. "I'm sorry," Robert said. "For all of it. For being weak. For choosing wrong. For hurting you and Marcus. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you deserved." Sarah sat down beside his bed, and Marcus watched his parents look at each other with a tenderness that transcended their history. "I know you are," Sarah said softly, "and I forgive you. You don't have to." "I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. I'm tired of carrying this anger." Robert reached for Sarah's hand, and she let him take it. "Is he happy? Did he have a good childhood?" "He had the best childhood I could give him. He was loved every single day." "Thank you for raising him, for making him the man he is."
He did that himself.
"With your guidance." Sarah looked over at Marcus, who was standing by the window trying to give them privacy in the small room. "Come here, baby." Marcus joined them beside the bed, and for a moment, they were a family. Broken, complicated, 32 years too late, but a family nonetheless. "I want you both to know," Robert said, his voice growing weaker, "that loving you was the best thing I ever did, and walking away was the worst. I can't change the second part, but I want you to know the first part is still true." Robert Mitchell died at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in July, exactly 32 years after he first walked into Mel's diner and fell in love with Sarah Williams. Marcus was holding one hand, Sarah was holding the other, and his last word was love. The funeral was small, but meaningful. Marcus learned that his father had quietly helped dozens of families over the years, paying medical bills, college tuitions, and mortgage payments for people who had fallen on hard times. The man who had been too afraid to publicly claim his son had spent his life trying to be a father to his entire community. After the service, Marcus and Sarah stood beside Robert's grave in the small cemetery outside Millfield. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked. "Getting to know him?" Marcus thought about this. "No, I regret that it took so long. I regret that we only had a few weeks. But I don't regret knowing him. He loved you. He always loved you." "I know, and I loved him too, even when I didn't want to." Sarah took Marcus's hand. "What happens now? Now we go home. We keep living. We try to be better than the generation before us." "And the anger, the hurt?" "I think," Marcus said slowly, "I think I'm going to try to let it go. Not for him, but for me. I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying his mistakes." 6 months later, Marcus received a package with no return address. Inside was a leather journal and a note. "From your father's attorney, he wanted you to have this." The journal was filled with Robert's poetry, written over 32 years, poems about love and loss, about fatherhood and fear, about the son he watched from a distance, and the life he was too afraid to live. The last poem was dated just days before his final heart attack. "To my son, I gave you life, but not my name. I gave you love, but not my time. I gave you nothing but my shame, and words that never learned to rhyme. But you became what I could not, a man of courage, skill, and grace. You healed the hearts that I forgot. You saved the lives I would not face. If I could live those years again, I'd choose the harder, braver path. I'd claim you then as I claim now. My son, my pride, my epitaph." Marcus closed the journal and looked out his office window at the mountains of North Georgia. Somewhere in those hills lay his father, at peace at last. And somewhere in his own heart, Marcus felt a similar peace, beginning to grow. He picked up his phone and called his mother. "Mama, I was thinking we should plan a vacation. Somewhere we've never been. Somewhere we can make new memories." "That sounds wonderful, baby. Where did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but I think it's time to stop looking backward and start looking forward." As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his father's greatest gift hadn't been the letters or the poetry or even the final reconciliation. Robert's greatest gift had been showing Marcus exactly the kind of father he didn't want to be, and in doing so, he had given Marcus the roadmap to be everything Robert had failed to become. The phone on Marcus's desk buzzed. Emergency surgery. A father of 3 had been in a car accident, his heart damaged, his family praying in the waiting room. Marcus grabbed his coat and headed for the door. He had lives to save, hearts to heal, families to keep together. He had learned from his father's mistakes, and now he would spend his life making sure other children never had to wonder if they were loved. In the end, perhaps that was redemption enough. 5 years later, Dr. Marcus Williams married Dr. Angela Thompson, a pediatric surgeon he met during a medical conference. Their wedding was small but joyful, held in the hospital chapel where Marcus had saved so many lives. Sarah walked Marcus down the aisle, beaming with pride. In the front row sat several of Marcus's former patients and their families, people whose lives he had saved, whose hearts he had healed. Marcus and Angela had their first child 2 years later, a son they named David Robert Williams. When Marcus held his son for the first time, he thought about his father, about the choices that had shaped their family, about the love that had existed even when it couldn't be expressed. "I will never leave you," Marcus whispered to his son. "I will never let you wonder if you're wanted. I will be the father you deserve." And he was. David grew up knowing he was loved, knowing his history, understanding that sometimes people make mistakes, but that love can transcend even the deepest wounds. Marcus told him about his grandfather, Robert, about the letters and the poetry and the man who had loved from a distance. "Do you miss him?" David asked one day when he was 7 years old. "I miss the father we could have been to each other," Marcus replied. "But I'm grateful for the father I became because of him." On quiet Sunday afternoons, Marcus would sometimes drive past the cemetery where Robert was buried. He never stopped, never left flowers, never said prayers. But he would slow down and remember the man who had given him life twice, once at birth, and once on an operating table when forgiveness became possible. The letters Robert had written were kept in a safety deposit box, waiting for the day when David would be old enough to understand the complicated legacy of love and loss that had shaped his family. Marcus hoped his son would learn from them, would understand that love is not always perfect, but that it can still be real. And in the mountains of North Georgia, in a small cemetery outside Millfield, Robert Mitchell's gravestone bears a simple inscription, "Beloved Father, love lives on." Below that, in smaller letters, are the words Marcus had added years later, "Forgiveness is possible." Because in the end, that was the truth Marcus had learned. Love is complicated. Forgiveness is possible. And sometimes the greatest gift a father can give his son is the chance to become everything he himself could not be. The story of Marcus Williams and Robert Mitchell is a story about choices and consequences, about love that endures even when it cannot be expressed, and about the power of forgiveness to heal wounds that have festered for decades. It is a story about second chances and last chances, about fathers and sons, about the complicated mathematics of the human heart. Most of all, it is a story about redemption, not the redemption of the father who failed, but the redemption of the son who chose to forgive, to heal, to become the man his father had always hoped he could be. In operating rooms across Georgia, Dr. Marcus Williams continues to save lives, to heal hearts, to keep families together. And every time he holds a beating heart in his hands, he remembers that love, however imperfect, however late, however complicated, is still the most powerful force in the human experience. That is his father's legacy. That is his gift to his son. That is the story that continues, one heartbeat at a time, one life at a time, one choice at a time.